Well, my name's Tom, and I'm going to kind of change what I thought I would talk about since I've listened for the last day and a half to a number of people speaking, and talk a little bit more about the human condition. You know, we've talked about technology, and how does technology help us do all these different things, but the reality is technology is just a tool that we use to allow us to process through whatever events we have in our day. So at the airport, that's what we're talking about today, the technology is out there. But until you get to a point where the technology is something you don't think about, it's just a process, you really want to do what as a human being you want to do to get through the airport, get to your trip, and enjoy yourself. So how can we relax and just enjoy our time at the airport? You know, the destination where we're going is about the journey. And if you don't know where you're going, any place will do. So you have to start off with kind of maybe thinking about where you want to get to, and then how you back up to get there. You know, when I was a kid, I traveled quite a bit with my parents, and I thought it was so much fun. It was, everybody thinks back to the glory days of travel and how it was this enjoyable process that you went through, and you didn't have the stress that you have today. Well, the reality is, I probably didn't have a lot of stress, but my guess is my parents did, because I just followed along and did what they told me to do, and I walked through the whole process. Well, maybe that's what technology should really be, is that, is our parents, that you use that as a tool so that you can do what you want to do and enjoy and look around and see all the things and enjoy the processes that you're going through. And the stress that we're talking about today is really the stress of the environments that we've created because of the processes that have been put in place for whatever reason. But they create the lines, they create the uncertainty, they create the stress to travel that we talk about. And so what do we have today that's starting to maybe change that process, and how do we take what we have as a baseline today and think about what do we really want it to be? If you took away all of those parameters, what do you really want to have it be? We've all talked about the smartphone and how it's going to be our panacea. It's going to solve all of our problems. We're going to be able to just use it and walk wherever we want, and we're tracked and we're followed. A lot of people don't like being tracked and followed, but that's a different topic of conversation. We've talked about the self bag drop, which, again, theoretically it sounds like a really good idea, but it's, right now, Auckland included, it really doesn't work the way I would want my bag drop to work, which means I just want to drop my bag. I don't want to talk to a machine. I don't want to interface with a machine. I just want to get rid of it. So why can't I just get rid of my bag? The biometrics. Biometrics are there. We have ability to facial recognition. We have ability to track people moving through airports, but it's pretty sophomoric in how we use it. We use it by standing in line so we get the opportunity to use it. Some of these other ones I think are actually pretty clever, especially the one on the left-hand side here on the screen. Knowing where you are in the building and know how long it takes you to get wherever you need to go, well, that's a pretty good one, because as a traveler, if you know how far you are from your gate, that's good knowledge that you can use. But knowing what it's time for you to board would be probably better information than just how far you are from your gate when your group of people that gets to board is called up there. We have these processes now where we think that, again, processing is the right idea, but maybe we need to think past how you process somebody and what the purpose of it is, so that, again, you're not just the sheep being led down the path and this is the next gate you have to jump through. We have to think of a way of how we get rid of all the gates and we just go to where we want to go. Self-boarding is another way. Again, self-boarding, a lot of these processes were set up to get rid of the person-to-person interface. Personally, I'd rather talk to a person than to a machine pretty much any time during the process, if I have that opportunity. If I have the opportunity to talk to nobody, machine or person, and I can just go where I'm going, that's maybe even better. So we started looking at some of these things over the past, 20 years, 20 plus years, and how airports are designed and how they're constructed. And a few things have really come to the forefront. Information is number one. If you really need, as a passenger, you need to be informed of all the different things that are impacting your trip. One of the things we did on this, what's up on the screen, is the big board of information, where your flight is, how long you have before your flight. But it's really just flight, destination, and time of departure, and is it delayed? But because of that, people were able to spend time in a more relaxed environment. They didn't go to their gate until they felt they needed to. But we really need to leverage that technology to allow us to really have more information than that, at a much more granular level, so that we can make decisions about what we do with really good information. And it's not out there yet today, but Frank's going to solve that problem. Other things that we think, so information is number one, and then the space. As architects, we focus on how people feel in spaces, how daylight and using daylight and filling rooms with daylight, how it changes how somebody feels. And how people feel while they're in the spaces that we design are really, in a lot of ways, what all of these processes that we're talking about really are there for. Do you feel safe? Do you feel like you know where you're going? Do you feel like you're comfortable when you're sitting in the chair? So it really comes back down to what I'll call the human experience. So the other pieces that we started to look at in some of our projects are choices. So different people interact with where they are differently. Some people like to be in a crowded bar and have noise and activity going on around them. Other people like to be in a little quiet spot with a lower ceiling where they can read a book, and that's how they want to engage with the space. So we have to provide, as we start to look at these opportunities, we have to provide opportunities for how people interact with the spaces in which they're spending time. Picture of the Los Angeles airport, where we've introduced a new technology with some of the video screens and some of that piece. So not only are you able to make your choice on where you sit and how you interact with the space, but you also have opportunities of distraction and wonder. And so we can start to, by creation of the space and how the space is formed, we get to start to interact with your emotions a little bit and give you, again, the opportunities. You have the opportunity to watch the video on the Time Tower, or you have the opportunity to go sit down and have a quiet cup of coffee somewhere. So giving them the opportunities, giving us the opportunities to interact with our space in a human way is something that we are finding is important and makes a better building in the end run. So that's all kind of what we've been building on in the last 20 years, 30 years of airport design since the glory days of the TWA terminal, which is this misnomer of the perfect terminal building. But what should the future look like? Well, I would argue that we really are dealing with an issue of scale. And you have the scale of the airplane, which will evolve and will change, but it's really somewhat outside of our control. You've got the scale of whatever the transportation mode is that you use to get to the airport, to get to that spot where you transition onto a plane. So you've got your cars and your buses and your trains, and then stuck right there in the middle are us humans, the people that have to actually interact with the space in this transition between the land side and the air side. And so that's where we dwell. We dwell in this environment of the personal space and where we sit today. So what do we do about that? How do we start to change the way we think about it? Frank was talking about, the processing in a ticketing hall, but why do we have a ticketing hall? Who's bought a ticket at the airport in the last 30 years? You don't buy your ticket at the airport. All you do in the ticketing hall, as Frank says, you get rid of your bag. Well, why do I have to go in a room to get rid of my bag? If I'm at my hotel, I should be able to check out and check my bag into my flight, and it just goes away. When I get to the airport, if I'm driving in, if I arrive by train or if I arrive by a private, Uber with no driver, I should be able to pull up to a curb, open up my door and put my bag on a belt and walk into the airport. And there is no ticketing hall. Basically, there is an arrival point where you get rid of your bag if you have one, or you just walk straight down a connector. That could be the connector between this building, this kind of a transportation center, and maybe the concourse where the planes park. So maybe all it is this connector. So you get out of your car and you walk across to the connector. Maybe when you're driving to the airport, it even tells you where you should pull up to the curb so that you can get out of your car as close as you can to that connector based on what's going on in terms of traffic and so on. You drop your bag and you walk across this bridge. And then you end up in a public domain. So these technologies are in their infancy, but a lot of what I'm talking about really exists. Baggage handling systems can go out to curbsides. It's just a matter of running the belt out there. Checking in, I'm working with Alaska Airlines on self-check-in. You can print out your bag tag at home, you should be able to reconcile yourself at home and drop your bag the closest time you get to a belt. So, I mean, I think some of these technologies are there. You know, you pull up your car to the curb, even if it is your car or not your car, whatever that may be, you pull up and you get out and you drop your bag and off you go. So that should be able to happen. We should be able to have that happen, you know, not in 50 years, but in, 5 years, 10 years. Why not? So security checkpoint is the one piece that's a little bit outside of our control, right? So each country has their own rules, has their own governances. But the reality is, if I have a connector running from a place where I get out of my car to a communal area on the concourse, whereas my Great Hall on the concourse, I should be able to be screened in that process. If that's a 200 yard long, 200 meter walk, let's just say, 150 meter walk from your car to the concourse, I should be able to be screened. I should be able to have my passport checked. I should be able to have this just by walking through the process. It should all be there. It should all be readable in some manner. And if I've already gotten rid of all my bags, and if I can trust that my bag will show up where I want to go, I'll stop carrying my bag on the plane with me if I get to that point, if it becomes easier. So I think, again, I think this is the possibility. So then what really ends up happening is we end up with the airport really becomes an airside common room which you wait for your plane to depart. And the process from wherever you start until you get here, you've processed through all of those in hopefully as seamless a manner as possible. So that lets you get to a terminal building now, which I'm going to call the terminal, is really now an airside area where you wait until your plane is ready to board. And one of the other things that we kind of forget is when we talk about that scale issue. When you think about concourses where you have to walk 500 yards or whatever that is, which is beyond a comfortable walking distance for somebody who's in their 60s or 70s, who's another one of our common travelers these days, we have to think about the population that travels. And we have to think about what are appropriate walking distances. And we shouldn't have any walking distances that are over that. So I don't think you should have more than maybe 6 gates away, or 3 gates, 3 on each side, let's call it, is about the farthest I would ever want to have my mother walk with me when we travel. She can walk down there, or I can push her in a wheelchair, but if you get much past that, you're really into these long distances, and you also feel somewhat disconnected, so you're not quite comfortable staying in this area because you're not quite sure how far away that walk is. So you really need to be able to control those distances, and I would suggest that maybe this common hold room really only supports like maybe 10 gates, 12 gates, something like that, and they become scalable so that you're connected now by maybe a people mover, so you can go from pod to pod. And each pod could be, maybe it kind of creates its own little neighborhood. So each one of those neighborhoods becomes the spot where you go to, where you wait for your flights. And they could each be branded, you can sell branding, and you can create these communities in the airport where people are comfortable and they know the connectivity and they know how it works. And it becomes much more humanistic in scale. So when you start creating these spaces that become the public spaces and you give them the opportunities, whether they're today or whether there's some future idea of today, the idea here is to start to create spaces in which people can thrive and in which you can bring them into and they can have a nice meal and a cup of coffee, they can read a book, they can do whatever it is they want to do, fully informed while they wait for their flights. So the future is really kind of taking a look at the processes and making sure that we have designed spaces that people can be comfortable, that they can engage with on their own terms, and that it is comfortable for them to move back and forth through them. And I really think that that distance may be out there in the next 5 to 10 years. The technology will catch up and allow that seamless transition, so you don't really have a ticketing hall anymore. You don't really have a parking garage that you go to. You really just have a curbside that you get out and a hold room that you go to that's common until it's time to take your flight. And so with that, that's what I thought I'd talk about today. So thank you for your time.